From our earliest days in school to modern corporate retreats, we are fed a persistent myth. We are taught that fairness, harmony, and absolute cooperation are the sole engines of success. Because we are so thoroughly prepared for peace, we walk into the real world completely blind. When faced with covert saboteurs, passive-aggressive colleagues, and quiet power plays, we rarely see the attacks coming until the damage is already done. Caught off guard, our reaction is entirely tactical. We get emotional, lash out blindly, or retreat in fear. We become so consumed by the immediate friction of the moment that we lose sight of any long-term objective. Survival requires the exact opposite approach. Instead of channeling the brutal, emotionally driven violence of Ares, we have to adopt the mindset of Athena. We must view conflict with cold, rational detachment. Becoming a strategic warrior does not actually start on a battlefield or in a boardroom. Before you can outmaneuver an opponent, you have to conquer the vulnerabilities of your own mind. Your greatest vulnerabilities are your emotional attachments and the comforting memory of past successes. To think strategically, you have to actively wage war on your desire for comfort and sever whatever ties you to the past. In 1519, Hernán Cortés found his expedition to Mexico on the brink of collapse. Outnumbered by a hostile empire, a faction of his own men plotted a mutiny, terrified of the odds and desperate to retreat to the safety of Cuba. Cortés didn't argue or try to persuade them. He secretly bribed his pilots to bore holes in his own fleet. By destroying the only means of escape, he forced his men onto what military theorists call death ground. When you have a backup plan, your mind remains divided. You operate at a fraction of your actual capacity. To trigger absolute presence of mind, you have to artificially remove your own psychological safety nets. By deliberately burning your metaphorical ships, you eliminate the luxury of fear and hesitation. Left with no option to retreat, the mind snaps into complete rational focus. Once you control your own mind, the next obstacle is the group you rely on. Organizations naturally breed groupthink. When leadership is divided to appease egos, decision-making becomes painfully slow and creatively dead. In 1939, General George C. Marshall inherited a hopelessly dysfunctional United States War Department. It was a bureaucratic maze of overlapping fiefdoms and aging generals who fiercely protected their turf. Rather than fighting every bureaucratic battle directly, Marshall quietly bypassed the old guard. He curated a network of young, ambitious officers, men like Dwight D. Eisenhower, who shared his precise vision for reform and rapid execution. Marshall placed these protégés in key positions throughout the department. He established unity of command without micromanaging. His deputies executed his intent flawlessly, acting as his proxies and forcing efficiency into the system. This mirrors the revolution in warfare engineered by Napoleon. He broke his massive army into smaller, self-sufficient corps. He gave his marshals a clear objective and let them run, creating a fast, autonomous force that effortlessly encircled rigid, traditional armies. The principle remains identical today. A fluid, decentralized team, driven by a single, unified vision, will consistently dismantle a slow, divided bureaucracy. When faced with an outwardly aggressive opponent, the instinct is to fight back directly. Initiating an attack against someone who thrives on conflict wastes your energy and exposes your strategy. The far superior approach is defensive. Franklin D. Roosevelt was a master of what you could call political jujitsu. He knew that absorbing an opponent's momentum was far more lethal than matching their force. Facing fierce criticism, Roosevelt would frequently retreat from the spotlight. In his absence, rivals would overextend themselves with increasingly absurd attacks, even accusing him of dispatching a Navy destroyer to retrieve his dog, Fala. When Roosevelt finally responded, he used their own hysteria against them, thriving in the chaos they created. By holding back, you bait your opponent into acting rashly. As they lunge forward, desperate to land a blow, they unbalance their own lines. You simply step aside and let their unchecked momentum carry them into a spiral. True dominance relies on a perfect economy of energy. You expend almost nothing, while your rival exhausts themselves engineering their own destruction. The architecture of the strategic warrior relies on these three pillars. It demands mastery over your own emotional reactions, strict structural control over the group you lead, and a leveraged patient defense against your enemies. Once you pull yourself above the battlefield's friction, the fog lifts. The seemingly random, chaotic actions of your rivals snap into clear focus as predictable patterns. You realize winning never requires being more aggressive. You just must be more rational, bypassing noise with minimal effort. Conflict is no longer a tragedy to be feared or avoided. It becomes a readable game, a permanent landscape where your knowledge seamlessly translates into the next decisive move.